Today's recipe calls for unsweetened shaved coconut. I'm going to show you how to make chocolate cherry coconut magic bars. It's like the easiest dessert ever to make, and they're super tasty as well. So with that said, let's get started. The first thing we need to do before we start these sweet treats is preheat the baking cube. Set the temp on the oven to 325 Fahrenheit or 162 degrees Celsius. While that's getting hot and bothered, we can get our pan prepped and ready to go. Snag a 9 by 13 inch baking pan. Grease that bad boy with a chunk of unsalted butter. Ensure you hit the corners and sides as well. Doing this will help prevent the crust from sticking later on. Talking about the crust, let's start prepping it out. Snag a large freezer bag and 14 standard sized graham cracker sheets. This should be enough to make 1 cup or 125 grams of graham cracker crumb. Toss the sheets in the bag, push out as much air as you can, then tightly zip it shut. After you've accomplished that, we need to smash the goods. You can use any crushing tool of your choosing. You can also use your built-in hammers, or live out your childhood wrestling dreams and drop some bows on them, then realize that kind of hurts and switch over to using a rolling pin, whack the crackers / roll them out until everything becomes a fine crumb or dust. Beware, the jagged edges will put a hole in the bag, so don't fling it around willy-nilly unless you want to clean up a mess. In the end, this is what it should look like. Set it aside to move on to the next step in the process, which is melting some butter to force the cracker crumb to stick together later on. Collect 2 sticks of unsalted butter and a small saucepan. We'll melt 1 cup or 226 grams of fat. Plop the sticks into the pansky and take it over to your heating device. Once on the burner, crank the heat up to a medium level of hotness. The goal is to simply melt the butter. Occasionally stir the solid fat around to help speed up the process. When things have transformed from a solid fat into a liquid fat, take it off the heat, set it aside for now. Let's move on to the last few steps of the crusty crust. Snag a medium-sized holding device and a fine mesh strainer. To that, we'll add in 1 1/2 cups or 180 grams of all-purpose flour. Next, dump in 1 teaspoon baking powder. This next ingredient is optional, but will bring a ton of goodness to the table. Add in a 1/4 cup or 25 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. This pairs well with coconut and cherries. To intensify the chocolate flavor, add in 2 teaspoons instant espresso powder. Sift things together, push through any clumps that were left behind. Next, add in your graham cracker dust. I decided to sift mine into the bowl to catch any large cracker pieces. This way I could break up the large chunks, but my little fingies were cramping, so I gave up and dumped it in. After the cracker dust, add in 1/2 teaspoon sea salt. To counterbalance the saltiness, add in 2/3 cup or 164 grams of packed dark brown sugar. Now that everything is in the bowl, lightly whisk your face off to bring everything into one giant mess of things. Bust up any large clumps of sugar that didn't break up during the whisking process. After the whisking work is done, you need to pour in the melted butter. The best tool for this job is a rubber spat. I recommend adding about half of the melted fat, giving it a quick mix, then adding the last of the butter. At first, it'll look like there isn't enough butter, but keep mixing everything until it goes from a light brown to a dark brown. In the end, it should look like a bowl of wet sand. Also, you should be able to pick some up and squeeze it into a clump that sticks together. If you can do that and it looks like mine, you know it's good and ready to go. Bring back your greased pan, add the chocolatey crumb crust in. Use your rubber spat to spread things out to make it into one layer. We need to pack / damp down the crust to make it a nice, tight, even layer. You can use your built-in grabber or a cup that has a flat bottom to it. You'll want to use a medium to high pushing force when you do this. It's important that it gets packed tight because when we cut it later, we do not want the whole thing coming apart. Don't forget to pack the edges and corners as well. Also, use the same pressure over the entire crust so it's even. Alright, let's move on to the main ingredients the recipe calls for, which is 16 ounces or 458 grams of just maraschino cherries without the juice. We need to give these little red delights a rough chop to make them into smaller pieces. I highly recommend wearing a glove when you do this, unless you want your skin to turn pink. Also, use a cutting board that won't soak up the juices to prevent it from also changing colors. I used to love eating these cherries as a kid. They're so good. Anyways, after they've been cut, transfer them over to a large holding device to the same bowl that has the cherries. Add in that thick milk, also known as sweetened condensed milk. We'll be adding 2 cans worth of this stuff, so in total 28 ounces or 792 grams. Ensure you scrape the cans clean to get all that sugary goodness. Give the fruit and milk a quick mixer to combine the 2 things together. Add in 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Following that, add the other flavored liquid known as almond extract. We'll add in 2 teaspoons of this stuff. The final ingredient to be dumped in is 4 cups or 340 grams unsweetened, finely shredded coconut. Add in about a quarter of the goods at first into the bowl, then give it a quick mix. Once it's mixed in, add the other large half of the shredded goods. Repeat the same mix-in moves as before. After that's occurred, add the last bit of the coconut. Fold everything together with a rubber spat. It's the easiest mechanism to use for this task. Keep doing this until you cannot see any more of the white coconut shreds. In the end, all the goods in the bowl should be pink in color. When everything becomes one cohesive, sugary, sticky mess, transfer the goods over to the pan that has our chocolate graham cracker crust in it. After you dump the diabetes in the pan, spread it out into one even layer of goods. Don't be afraid to spread things into the corners and edges of the pan. Use a light touch when spreading things out. An offset spatula would work for this. A rubber spat works just as well. When things are perfect, snag that pan, huck that thing into the preheated oven, place it on the middle rack for the best baking results. Set a timer to bake this hunk of goodness for 40 minutes or until the top becomes a light golden brown color. Times may vary depending on how hot your little oven runs. When the buzzer rings, pull that sweet treat out of the heat. Allow the pan to hang out for a bit on your work surface. When things cool a bit, transfer the pan to a wire rack to allow the bottom to cool down as well. Let the dessert cool down for at least a full hour. After the pan has cooled and is back to room temperature weather, cover it with some type of protection. We need to toss it into the fridge box. Alright, now that our coconut bars are done and completely cool, we're going to toss them in the fridge so they can fully set up. You're going to do this for at least 4 hours or up to overnight. I'm going to let mine chill overnight because I'm going to pretend to go do more important things. So with that said, we'll see you tomorrow. Alright, now that it's the next day, let's pull this sweet treat out of the cold and let's cut into this thing. Alright, let's cut into this bad boy. Use whatever cutting tool of your choice. Do your best to avoid using a knife or a metal tool. You want to avoid these so you don't scratch and ruin your pan. It'll take a little effort to cut through the crust, so be ready to tap into your inner gym bro. I had no choice but to use a metal spat to cut through the crust. A plastic chef's knife finally has a use for something. No hate or whatever plastic knife. But anyways, cut the goods into as big of pieces as your little cherry heart desires. To help achieve equal pieces, lightly score the top of the bars of magic. This will help you eye out how big your pieces will look. It helps if you cut the bars in half vertically and then make your sections to what you want. In a land very far, far away, this should work for perfect pieces, but I have terrible vision apparently, so things are not equal, but you know, oh well. Use a small offset spatula to get your pieces out of the pan. Store the desserts in an airtight container in the refrigerator or dig into them immediately. Eat these sweet treats with a pina colada on a hot summer day, or make these for your boo thing, but instead of cutting them into squares, use a heart-shaped cookie cutter to punch them out. Oh, so precious. Yeah, you're welcome for that idea. It's a freebie. Anyways, whatever you decide to do, just enjoy. Alright, now that our chocolate cherry coconut bars are done, let's give them the old taste-a-roo. So looking at them, it came out super aesthetically pleasing. There's that nice bright reddish pink color in there. Then we got that sweet golden brown on the top. It looks super tasty, and then there's that fat, thick layer of crust that looks all chocolatey and delicious. Overall, they just look really enticing, so let's give it a shot. These things came out really good. The first thing that hits your palate is the richness and sweetness of the dessert itself. And as time goes on, or the more you eat, that coconut really starts to shine through and come through really well. And the toasted coconut on top that got that sweet, sweet golden brown color brings a bit of nuttiness and that delicious toasted flavor as well. Then you get hit with the distinct maraschino cherry, which is super tasty. And in the background, you get a faint hint of the vanilla extract and that almond extract. Then of course you get a bit of chocolatiness as well that pairs really well with the coconut and the cherries themselves. Texture wise, the coconut has a little bit of texture to it. Then you get that like gushy, fruity texture as well from the cherries. And we get a ton of texture from that super thick crust on the bottom that brings everything together. And overall, it's just super good and you have to make them. This recipe is super easy to slap together. It makes for that perfect last minute dessert that you need to make for that party you forgot you had. And you can pretty much make this to suit your palate any which way you want. Maybe go less cherries so the coconut is more dominant, or add a ton more cherries because that's your favorite part, or get real bougie and crazy and add some toasted sliced almonds in there to bring a ton of flavor to the table. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. And I have a lot of this stuff left over and I need to figure out what to do with it. So I'm gonna go do that and we'll see you on the next one. All right, now that our I did press record. Okay, I'm gonna stop it now. All right, flavor as well. It's gonna take forever. The first thing that hits your palate is that super sweetness from the dessert. Super sweetness. Flavor. Recipe that you need to put together before you go to that party. That you need to